BS Busters. Thank you for joining us. Before we go any further, I'd like to have this gentleman introduce himself. Go ahead, sir. Introduce yourself. What you been playing?
Well, this is Nito, and I haven't really been playing too much this past week or so. Um, but the game I was played last is Metaphor Refantasia. The
All
game's
right.
pretty good.
Yeah, it's like Persona, but without the baggage.
Yeah,
I mean, you ever wanted to play Persona but not have the baggage? Metaphor Refantasia. You know, it's like kind of like. I mean, I like when the Atlas people make a Persona game or a Shin Megami Tensei game without the baggage. That's why I liked what was that other game? Persona Emblem that came out on the Wii U and the Switch. I like games like that. I like games where they take, hey, let's take this concept but stretch it in a different direction. Um, so anyway, but as of late, I've been personally been playing Beyond Galaxy Land. So take Final Fantasy VI, combine that with a dash of Earthbound, and then make it into a 2D pseudo platformer time to attack RPG in the vein of a Paper Mario, and you have Beyond Galaxy Land. Except it's science fiction. Uh, the central conceit of the game is that the main character is a young boy who was trying to get it in with his. He's like 14 years old, and he's trying to. He went to a costume party with his like this girl that he wants to get a little bit closer to, and some bad shit happens. The Earth is devoured by this biological weapon released by these super advanced aliens who have reached the point where they can't evolve anymore, and they want to go beyond to a next dimension of existence, but they can't go through the door to do it. So they release this biological weapon that they thought was gonna make it easier for them to ascend, but instead it just winds up destroying life-bearing planets, one of which was Earth. But your main character winds up escaping through a doorway to this, like, kind of like last refuge that these aliens created called Galaxy Land, where all these disparate species whose planets were devoured are now living, and it's a fun little game. The main character starts out as a whiny crybaby, but like I'm kind of like it's refreshing to have an RPG where the main character is some stoic, everyman, like unstoppable. Like the world is coming down, he's just gonna pick up his sword and start fighting. Like it's like this character, everyone he knows has died. He goes to the Earth. It's like a desolate, lifeless wasteland. It's like, yeah, I'd be crying too.
yeah. What's this game called?
Beyond Galaxy Land.
Okay.
It's one of those games where you're like I got it on a whim, and then I played it. I'm like, oh, this is actually really fucking good. Like it's much better. It's much better than it has any business being. It's one of those games. It's like this should be terrible on paper. This should be a steaming pile of shit, and yet it is not.
Galaxy what?
Beyond Galaxy Land.
Yeah. Beyond Galaxy Land. Okay.
Yeah, like on paper, this should be terrible, and yet it's actually pretty goddamn good. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that it's legit good. Because typically speaking, little indie games like this should be terrible, and yet this game is surprisingly good.
Yeah, that's good.
We don't get games like this, like little. And the thing is like as I've gotten older, I realize I like games that respect my time. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
when you get older, when you're a kid, you have all the time in the world to play video games. You've got summer break, so you've got a good 4 months of just I can play all the games I like. And then you get this age and you're like, then you become an adult and you get a job and you or kids or responsibilities. It's like I don't have the time to play games like I used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if you have the time, you don't have even if you have the time, you find that games aren't like they used to be. Like games that used to be like, man, I can plow hours and hours into this shit. You're like, do I really want to? Do I really want to plow hours and hours of time into this? It's like, probably not. You know. But like I said, this game respects your time. It
Yeah.
clocks in under like 20 hours total.
Okay.
If you and like the side quests are like, oh,
Yeah.
you can get this shit pretty quick. I think it's on the Switch. I got it on PC because I find myself not liking to play Switch games these days because
Yeah.
I find them to be a lot of games on my Switch run like shit. And once you have uncapped frame rates, or you can set it to 120 or 60 frames solid, it's really hard to go back to, oh, this shit can't even do 30 frames per second solid on the Switch. It's like, oh, this doesn't play very, I don't care about resolution, but frame rate. I'm sorry, I can't go back. I can't go back to shitty frame rates. And I know some people are going to get mad when they hear that. They're going to be like, but I like insert system here. It doesn't bother me. I'm just talking about my personal druthers, okay? You don't have to agree with me or disagree with me. I'm just telling you what I personally like, all right? I don't like playing games that are sub 60 frames per second.
Yeah.
Okay? It is very difficult for me to enjoy a game that can't even you know. Anyway, enough about that. So, anything else been going on with your life before we get into these topics?
Uh,
Nothing? Nothing's
uh,
been going on? Just been quiet?
yeah. It's just been relatively quiet.
Oh, that's good. You know, people like peace and quiet in their lives. I can understand it. Anyway, yeah, I start a new job at the beginning of the year, which I'm quite happy about. Right now, I've just been chilling, sold my business, so don't have to worry about that
Yeah.
anymore. Anyway, let's get started with these topics. Anyway, let's see. So the first topic we're going to cover is let's get the bad news out the way first. Layoffs in the video game industry. Um, it's been going on and on and on and on. It hasn't stopped. It's like hearing the same sad love song over and over and again, and it doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
But we have to talk about it because it's news. It's video game news. So we have 3 stories here of people getting laid off. I'm not going to go through the entire stories. I'm just going to do the headlines and give my thoughts on it, and you can give your thoughts on it too. Number one, Ubisoft is shutting down the X-Defiant team. Is shutting down X-Defiant team in 2025, laying off half of its team, and 2 studios will close too. Ubisoft will shut down its free-to-play shooter X-Defiant. Servers will remain on until June 3rd, 2025, but the game will no longer be offered for download, and player registration will be closed. Despite the sunsetting, X-Defiant players will get access to its third season content sometime in the near future. Nearly 300 people will be laid off. across 134 people across 143 in San Francisco offices, and 134 across the Ubisoft's Osaka and Sydney locations will be laid off. The other half of the X-Defiant production team will move on to other roles at Ubisoft, according to the chief studios and portfolio officer Marie-Sophie de Wabert. I mean, they were charging people $69 for the ultimate version of this game, for a free to play game, which is shady as hell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why are you charging people for a free to play game? That's surely sus as fuck. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But, that's the world we live in. We live in a world where people like to we live in a world where people like to do, make games that are like that, you know what I'm saying?
So what was this game that they were charging people for a free to play game?
X Defiant.
X Defiant?
Yeah, X Defiant.
I think I've heard of that game. That's
I mean,
crazy.
it's
So
this game. It looked kind of interesting. I was like, oh, this looks interesting, but I was like, nobody's like going out of their way for this, like, because I mean, we said it before in the cast before, like, people have a finite amount of time to play a live to plow into gaming. People have a finite amount of time to plow into gaming, and they don't want to. People got shit they want to do with their time, and they don't want to spend a lot of it, on some bullshit. And I mean, like all these companies, they saw that stuff like Fortnite is making a lot of money, and they said, "Hey, we can do that too." Not realizing that people have a finite amount of time.
yeah.
People have a finite amount of time to make a game.
Yeah.
People have a finite amount of time to play a game. So why would you make, like, I don't understand people making games and they're like, "Oh, yeah, we can just do this." I'm like, people don't have that type of time, man. What?
Yeah.
You know? It's like I play single player games, which ostensibly a single player game gives you all the time in the world to play that game. And even there's been times where I like have a single player game and people like, "Have you beaten it?" It's like, man, I get so far and then I kind of like, something else comes along and I play that. It's like,
Yeah.
and I play single player games all the time. Like, I love single player games because I think you get more bang for your buck with a single player game. You know, like typically speaking, if I want more game, I can just get I can just get my hands on on DLC. You know what I'm saying? Versus, the repetitive monetary transactions that exist within a online only game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you play Fortnite, you play Destiny, you play any of that type of. those live service games, even if they say they're free to play, at some point you're going to be encouraged to spend your money on some bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, I hate to say it like that, but people, let's call it what it is. On some bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you know, that's the problem. They're still working off of that old model that they were uh doing with during the pandemic. Still think they can make all that money. They think people have they still lose themselves into thinking people still have all that time to to play their games when there's a lot of other games you have to compete with.
Well, even if people have the money, it really like here's the thing: you can always make more money because typically speaking, your income is going to go up until you reach a plateau, and then it's gonna stagnate out. All right, and then your income's going to take a dip when you retire because typically speaking, people who retire never make as much money as when they were actively working. But even if you
Yeah.
have the time, like the only time you really have time to play video games is when you retire.
Yeah.
People who are the generation before mine, so Gen X, the generation before that, they're retiring and they have time to play video games. Video games were a part of the Gen X childhood for a lot of people. They were playing video games. So when they retire, they'll be playing video games. But people before that weren't playing video games. They were watching TV and going out to sports games and hanging out with their friends. They were more social. Okay? So clearly, fucking clearly, um, that's not like these companies they're competing for your time.
Yeah.
They're competing for your time. And time is a commodity. Like you can always make more money. You can sell some shit, you can apply to a different job, you'd work a side hustle and make more money. But time can't make more time.
Yeah.
Okay? Once your time is gone, it's gone. Okay? Believe me, if I could get back 10 years and go back to being 28, I'd love that shit. Okay?
Yeah.
Can't do it. Anyway, let's keep it moving. More bad news. More than 300 developers are losing their jobs. More people are losing their jobs. Ilphonic, the people who made, sorry, not Ilphonic. Let's see. Okay, so this includes the Ubisoft cuts. Oh, the people who made Deceive Incorporated has closed outright. Sweet Bandits.
Ooh, what was it? Sweet Bandits?
Yeah, they made Deceive Incorporated. Deceive Incorporated was kind of like the game where you basically would choose a hero character and you had to go, you were on this spaceship cruise liner where you had to basically complete some objective depending on the game mode, like steal something or assassinate someone. But the thing was is that you didn't know, like it was kind of like Hunt for the Werewolf, where you don't know who the werewolf is. Like you didn't know who had the object or whatever. You had to look at clues in the game or use each character's special abilities depending on which character you're playing as to figure out who was the target or who had the MacGuffin or whatever. And it was an interesting concept, but I was like, I don't think this game's going to do that well. It looks fun, but there's so many of these around here that it's very difficult for me to think that this is going to, do something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Torn Banner Studios, the people who made the Chivalry games. Those games are really popular.
Another studio. That's great. Yeah.
I mean, it's. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Um, we
I
got
just
one
think
more. Illphonic Studios, the people who made Predator, that Predator asymmetric survivor game where you could either be the Predator murdering people or you could be the Marines fighting against the Predator. They also made that Friday the 13th game, and I think they also did the Killer Clowns from Outer Space game.
yeah.
Well, they're laying off people.
Mm. That, I mean, that's great. That's unfortunate. Or what's going on? It's not like
What?
I guess their games just didn't sell well, or what?
Well, their Friday the 13th game did really well, but there was a dispute with who owned the rights to Jason Voorhees. So they had to drop their support for that game. So they did Predator after that, and that did okay, but Predator has never been as popular as Friday the 13th. Jason
Yeah.
Voorhees and all that shit. Which is fair. I mean, I grew up watching those movies, so I understand why people would be attached to them. Nothing like seeing teenagers get murdered in the woods for doing drugs and having sex.
Yeah.
Because those are the rules. As long as you don't do drugs or have sex. Although, I mean, those used to be the rules. In like the third movie, he just murders some fat girl who's in the woods eating a banana. So it's like, who knows? It's like,
Yeah, at some point it
look,
was like, well, we need to kill somebody. We need to, and
yeah,
then they
yeah.
start
Somebody
killing
needs
people,
to
or else people
die.
are gonna,
Yeah, it's gonna
or
be
else
your
people
fat
are
ass
gonna get
piggy.
bored and leave
Yeah,
the theater.
yeah. Someone's got to
Yeah.
die. So it might as well be the fat chick.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing that bothers me with a lot of these films is that these horror movies is that they'll have some rules and then they'll just throw those rules underneath a bush because they're like, we can't.
I think a lot of it just has to do with, well, we need. I think some people it's like, wouldn't it be really cool if somebody died in this way?
Yeah,
But they're
yeah.
not exactly phone. But we're not. But
I
they'll
mean,
put more butts in movie theater seats though.
that's those Saw movies. All those Saw movies are based like they used to have a rule. It's like, okay, he's doing this to teach you a lesson to appreciate life or all that type of shit. And then it just turned into we just want to see people die. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
it's
that's what I've
like what
heard.
happened to the rules there used to be?
They
There
made
used to
like
be
50.
rules.
They made like 15 of those movies, and it's just kind of like, I think you could have just made one and or maybe two or three, and
Yeah, I would say three, maybe four, maybe four.
yeah,
But then it got to the point where they're like, "Well, we killed off Jigsaw, but he's got apprentices." I'm like, "This is just fucking stupid."
yeah.
My one
I haven't
entry.
heard from people that don't even like horror movies thought the first movie was phenomenal, was great,
Oh yeah,
and it's just
because the
they slowly,
twist, you don't see the twist coming. Although the
yeah,
clues are there the entire time you're watching it. It's like, yeah, this guy is clearly one of these bodies is not a dead person.
yeah, yeah. I'd actually like to see the first Saw movie at some point. I haven't seen it.
What, you're
I
not
need
into
to go.
torture porn?
No, I'm just not into torture porn. Like I like stuff that's like when it comes to horror, I like stuff that's like
The
you know
anticipation?
anticipation, something that's like super mind bending,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, for
psychological thrillers. But
Yeah, for me, I'm not into torture porn. If I have horror, I like when I watch horror, I like the concept of looking, and I know that the people like knowing like me as the audience, I know what's going on, and I know that the people on the screen are fucked. They don't know they're fucked. I know they're fucked, and seeing the realization of them knowing that they're fucked is what makes it a horror for me.
yeah,
Like John Carpenter's The Thing. Like realizing that like the first time you watch it, you're like, oh, this is a sci-fi horror film. The second time you watch it and you realize that like if you watch the first one with the movie with subtitles, that the Norwegian pilot's telling them that's the thing, I'm trying to kill it, and then they take him down. He's like fuck, and it like, and how the dog is basically walking around the facility finding out where everything is. He's casing the place, and you realize, oh, these people are fucked. And it just gets worse. You're seeing people getting picked up. It's like, oh, they're fucked. Or you watch Cronenberg's The Fly, and you see the main character go into the teleporter with the fly, and then he goes to the other teleporter, and it's not there anymore. And you're like, oh man, you're fucked. And seeing his body degenerate as he turns into a human fly, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the horror of it is knowing that this person is seriously fucked, and the lengths they go through to try and figure out why they're fucked, how to undo the fucking, and yet they can't. And the end of the film is amazing. But anyway, that's how I like my horror. I don't like just straight up body horror. If you're gonna have body horror, you need to earn that shit, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, if you earn the body horror, it's like, oh, well, this is why this happened. It's like, oh, shit, that's fucked up. But if you just, like...
You're just throwing people in a blender.
Yeah, just for no goddamn reason. Just, hey, look at this fucked up shit. It's like, I don't really appreciate this.
Oh, there was one guilty pleasure horror movie I did like, and that was Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah, but Cabin in the Woods was more like a comedy.
A parody? Yeah,
It
was a comedy.
It was more of a comedy. It wasn't like, or
yeah.
Dale and Chuck and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, like you think these rednecks are just being like are going to be the villains, but it turns out they're like, everyone thinks they're going to do some fucked up shit, but they're just kind of like they're some of the nicest people on earth. It's just people have the suspicion that they're going to do some shady shit because they're
Shady look.
Because they're rednecks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's obviously a horror movie parody.
Yeah. But that's my thing. That's what I like. I'm like, oh, I like that type of stuff. I like, if you're gonna do like I know a lot of people, man, I love Terrifier. I'm like, I don't want to see some fucked up shit like that. I'm sorry, I don't. Okay, I don't want to see anyone getting tortured or horrifically mutilated just because, unless there's a valid reason, storyline reason why this has to be. I don't want to see shit like that. Anyway, enough about the bad news. Let's talk about some good shit. Steam has a new feature that lets you record shit while you're playing games.
That's cool.
They say it's better than NVIDIA Shadow Play.
Well, that's great. And Shadowplay is kind of annoying to use sometimes.
I have an NVIDIA graphics card on my gaming laptop, and that's about it. And Steam recordings reserves 8 gigabytes, and if you do a 30-second 1080p clip at 60 frames per second, Steam crunches it down to 43 megabytes. They must have a really fucking good encoder. And they say, the person writing this says the longest clip they've ever exported, a complete 22-minute recording of the Halo 2 E3 demo, was only 1.88 gigabytes. A 5-second minute recording of Battlefield 2042 they made with Shadowplay last night is 1.78. So damn, I guess I might have to start using this. And it only records the game.
Oh, okay.
And you can find it under the Steam settings game recording. So there you go. So for those of you who don't have a graphics card or a good recording shit, you can now record shit using Steam. So yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
if you want to do like little like
Yeah.
you know you want to get capture some video footage, but you don't want to go through all the bullshit. And plus, it seems like it's got some good encoding going on. I mean, I'm look anything that gives you options, I'm happy about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to have options, nice to have multiple ways to do these things.
I know some people are gonna get mad. Like, oh, look, I love options. Give me options. The more options, the better. I know some people are gonna get mad about that. They're like, oh, but options are a good thing. Options are always a good thing. You know. Anyway, that being said, I guess we'll keep on talking about the main topic, which is Final Fantasy is failing. It's stagnant, and yet JRPGs have had a renaissance. Other franchises, Dragon Quest, the Trail series, shit, even Yakuza turned into a straight up RPG, and it's doing well with the Like a Dragon 8 and Like a Dragon 9, along with Persona. But Final Fantasy just cannot seem to catch a break. And I mean, do you have any thoughts as to why?
Well, you're not giving people what they want. You know, the remake of Final Fantasy VII. When Final Fantasy VII, the second one came out, it sold less because the remake for a lot of people wasn't what they wanted, wasn't what they were hoping for. And then you have Final Fantasy 16. It's just a straight up action RPG, and there was no towns. And I mean, I guess there was towns, but there wasn't really party members, and they really simplified everything with simplified everything too much with Final Fantasy 15. Um, 13 was really the beginning of the downfall of the franchise. A lot of those people have left, and Final Fantasy is essentially a shell of itself. I know people were defending Final Fantasy 16 when it came out, saying, there was these various different story changes and all this other stuff. I heard a few of the arguments, but for the most part, it just wasn't what people wanted. Um, Big mistake is the Final Fantasy VII remake and 16 were both PlayStation exclusive. So then that also created problems. People, it's not 90s where people are going to go out and buy a single console for one freaking game. So and not to mention when you have platforms like the Switch, even the Xbox, and the PC, where there are plenty of games to play on the system. So, if you miss out on one game, it's like, oh well, there are other games out there to play. So
Well, I mean,
yeah,
the
there's a
the
list of
only
reasons.
the only company that can sell single items and still do kind of well is Nintendo. Like
Yeah,
people will buy a Switch for one or two games. PlayStation doesn't have that pull anymore. Microsoft doesn't have that pull anymore. So it just kind of boils down to um, that I'm gonna to go deeper than that. I think that I think that ultimately, I think the big thing is that um, I think I think that the fundamental difference between all those games and Final Fantasy is that the foundation of Persona, Like a Dragon, Dragon Quest, the Trail series, the foundation has been solid with those games for years. For years, they've been solid. Like, you know what you're going to get every time. Final Fantasy hasn't had a solid foundation since Final Fantasy X.
yeah,
Every other Final Fantasy game is like, well, we want to do something new. And that's not what Final Fantasy was. Final Fantasy was like Taco Bell. Taco Bell, they only have 5, 6 major ingredients, and then they just mix them in different ways to create new things. That's what Final Fantasy was. Okay, you were gonna get some heroes going on a quest, elemental magic. You were gonna have some type of summon, Rama, Ifrit, Shivra, Phoenix, some shit like that, right?
yeah,
Titan, you were gonna have that, okay? You were gonna have classes. It was either gonna be a class system or like Final Fantasy 1 or 3, or you could build a class based on how you built your character, aka Final Fantasy 2. Final Fantasy 4 had fixed classes. Final Fantasy 5 had the class system again of 3, except more refined. Final Fantasy 6, you had a pseudo fixed class system, but depending on how you equipped certain magicites, you could basically push certain characters into certain stats, into certain builds if you wanted to, and what you equipped. So, I mean, it was a little bit freeform mixed with fixed, but that was Final Fantasy. It was similar elements being remixed in different ways. And then Final Fantasy, then Hironobu Sakaguchi leaves, and Final Fantasy becomes this IP that they're like, we can do whatever we want. But they didn't have the
mm,
talent to do anything really talented with it. It was just some bullshit, you know? It was like, oh, we got Final Fantasy uh, 12, which I would say Final Fantasy 12 isn't really a Final Fantasy game. It's a Final Fantasy Tactics RPG because it's set in the same universe as Final Fantasy Tactics. That entire franchise, same universe, different from the other Final Fantasy games. It's a shared universe. Final Fantasy 13 is where it kind of shat the bed and sat in it. Didn't even get out and change the sheets. Okay? Ooh boy, Final Fantasy 13 is so fucking bad.
yeah,
It's Final Fantasy 13 is so bad that I, as a gamer, I'm like, I can't believe this shit was made.
yeah. That's pretty crazy.
I mean, like I played through Final Fantasy 13. I'm like, who the fuck signed off on this? A Final Fantasy game that you have to spend almost 30 hours to where the game starts to open up and you can go to towns.
Mm,
Someone signed off on this design. Someone was like, yeah, this is the way to go. Anyway, Um, so yeah, as long as Final Fantasy, in my humble opinion, as long as Final Fantasy continues to be like, as long as there's no foundational concepts on how to make a Final Fantasy game, it's going to continue to be the shit that it's been.
Yeah.
But that's my own personal opinion. Um, so any thoughts before we move on to free topic and hot takes?
No, no, I don't have any. I don't have anything.
All right. So I guess we go to free topic and then hot takes. Do you have?
I saw a headline on one of the YouTube videos that my feed. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but under 150,000 jobs cut in the tech industry. And the far signs I saw was Tesla, Microsoft, and Intel. I'm like, what, man? Your Intel's been really fucking up lately with how they've been handling their CPUs. That's really the only company and tech company I've known has not been doing stellar for the past, at least for the past few months. For the past, actually, the past year hasn't been great for Intel. 13th gen CPUs
Well,
absolutely falling apart, and then their new CPUs that came out with severely disappointing.
well,
Um,
uh,
uh, Go
no,
ahead.
sorry. Well, the thing is with Intel is that the problem with Intel is that like in recently their CEO resigned, but he was just a convenient scapegoat
Yeah.
because it what it boils down to is that um, it was like you're looking at 20 years of bad management. And they didn't give the guy really, like, they gave him 3.5 years to turn around 20 years of bad management, which is not really a fair assessment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Obviously, it was the scapegoat, and I heard some rumors that there were some ego conflicts uh, pertaining to certain ideas too, and people sabotaging each other's projects and ideas. Some infighting going on in Intel.
What's that old
So,
saying? A house divided against itself cannot stand.
yeah, yeah, and that's currently what's happening uh, within that company. At the so I've heard this rumor, but but and not to I mean it's obviously there must be some validity to that rumor just because of how they've been handling some of their products the past year. But yeah, um, I mean with AMD, they didn't. I know they just released their game CPU, but their CPUs before that wasn't exactly setting the world on fire. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with big tech right now. It just seems like it just either seems like everybody just it's either people want more and they're tired of the same old, or you know, they're expecting maybe too much out of these companies, or they're just not doing what they're
They're not doing what they're supposed to.
probably some more. It leans more towards that than it is people wanting expecting more of these companies. Because I've noticed about a lot of tech companies, especially Intel, way back in the day, is like, you know, they're at the end of the day they're selling a product. So if they're comfortable, they're not really going to innovate, and they're just going to come out with reiterations of the same thing every year because they don't have any incentive to innovate. So that becomes a problem.
I mean, that's why Intel is in the shape it's in. Like, there were plenty of chances they had to make better items, to innovate, and their then CEO, which was not Pat Gelsinger, it was other people. They basically said, "No, we're just going to focus on our Windows Intel thing."
Yeah.
And frankly speaking, that's not a winning combination. Like, if you have a tech company, you have to constantly innovate. That's how you stay ahead, is you innovate. You can't rest on your laurels and focus on one product. That's how IBM went under. Okay, and IBM helped create the modern PC. That was IBM. And yet, because they sat on their asses and just really failed to innovate, they lost the market. They lost the market they helped create. Anyway, um,
Yeah.
enough about that. I agree. I agree with your topic. That was a good topic. Well brought up, man. Well brought up. I got no free topic. I'll just go to hot take. Here's my hot take. I know I said this jokingly before, but since Hironobu Sakaguchi is letting Square Enix publish Neo Fantasian, they should give him a ton of money and just let him take over Final Fantasy again. Because when that man was running Final Fantasy, you got 3 Final Fantasies per console gen. 3.
Yeah.
During the NES era, you got Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3. During the Super Famicom era, you got 4, 5, and 6. During the PS1 era, you got 7, 8, and 9. It was only during the Final Fantasy, during the 6th gen, that you only got 2 Final Fantasies under his auspices, and one was absolute shit. Final Fantasy X too. Final Fantasy X, though, is arguably a decent Final Fantasy game. Um, I'm not overly fond of it because I don't like the main character, but uh, or at least I don't like the character who they ostensibly put in as the main character. Although, in hindsight, the main character of Final Fantasy X isn't Titus, it's Yuna. But uh, Titus is the character you start the game with, and I'm like, this person is insufferable. I hate this character. Uh, so that kind of turned me off on that game. But you still got 3 Final Fantasies during the 6th gen with 10, 10, 2, and 12. But holy shit, did Final Fantasy go under when he left? Like, really under. So anyway, that's my hot take. They should just give it back to. They should just give it back to. Hironobu Sakaguchi. He's working for the company tangentially. Just bring the shit back. Get the band back together. You know, Blues
Yeah.
Brothers style. We're getting the band back together. We're on a mission from God. Because I'd rather do that than the shit we've been getting. Because I know everyone thought when Yoshi P. I knew that that game was fucked when he was like, well, what is a JRPG? I'm like, why are you motherfucker, you know what a JRPG is. Why are you acting like that's a dirty word? And then they're like, oh, Platinum's helping us make it. I'm like, oh, God, no, please don't do this. Because Platinum makes action games. And they fucked that up, as per usual, because it's Square Enix. Or I should say, the reason I think they fucked that up isn't because it's Square Enix, but because they were probably thinking we have to get this game. We need a quick turnaround with this game, and we don't have time to do all the assets and work that it would take to make this into a full-bodied RPG. So we'll do some other shit.
Yeah.
Because Platinum works quick. They're known for doing quick turnarounds. But I could be wrong. You know, that could not be my opinion. I could in fact be wrong. I'm probably not, but I could be. But anyway, so yeah, just give Final Fantasy back to someone who actually gives a fuck about the franchise. You know what I mean? Because clearly
Yeah.
Square Enix doesn't. They continuously sabotage their own franchise repeatedly.
Yeah. What they do. What they do best.
It's like, oh, let's sabotage this. Like what it like Dragon Quest HD 2D is selling gangbusters. It's doing very well. They could have instead of putting out Final Fantasy 16 in 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, they could have just delayed that game, put towns and villages in there, make it more of a traditional game, and put it out next year. And
Yeah.
no one would have been none the wiser.
Yeah.
But they were like, we got to get something out right now. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Like, for real, no one was asking for this.
Yeah.
But that's my problem with a lot of these games. It's like, why would you do that? I don't.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'm a Final Fantasy fan. I grew up with this franchise. Why do you keep on shitting on this franchise?
Yeah.
I mean, it's your franchise. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was my hot take. Do you have a hot take?
Um, don't get too wrapped up in the tech game. Yeah, I know it's easy to get. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever bought a piece of technology and then, a few months later they announce something new and faster
Yeah.
and more powerful than the last thing you had. And if you're like, oh, I should have just waited. But the thing is, there's always going to be something new and powerful and stronger down the road, no matter what you end up buying. Whether you buy something 6 months from when it came out or a year now from when it's come out, just uh, just buy what you need at the moment and not worry about it because it's easy to get lost in that. You
Lost in
know,
the sauce.
lost in the sauce. All those charts talking about how, oh man, look at all these numbers. They're a lot bigger than the numbers I have on my computer
I mean,
or on my laptop.
for me, I just look at, is it, am I getting that much of a am I getting that much of a performance boost? Like I looked at what leaked about the new AMD cards. And what I have, like the performance is only like 10-15% of what I can do right now. So it's not enough for me to, oh, I got to upgrade immediately.
The thing is, people have to ask themselves what they actually do with their computers. What games do you actually play? Because it's like you bought your $2,000 card, last week, and then they announced a new $2,000 card, and you're just kind of like,
3,000.
well, $3,000
Yeah.
card, and it's just kind of like, well, I don't know. Am I gonna actually need do the games I play right now actually warranted another upgrade? More than likely, for the majority of people, probably not.
Yeah, the way I look at it is unless you absolutely, unless, like, okay, if you have hardware, like if you have a top of the line um, motherboard with top of the line memory, well, you need a high capacity graphics card to go with that. Putting something that doesn't fit that that hardware is gonna actually decrease your performance. Yeah,
Yeah,
unfortunately. But I mean, if you most people aren't spending like $500 for a motherboard building a
yeah,
PC. They're just not. So it's understandable that you know
yeah,
it's kind of like, think of it like this: if you have a Mustang or a sports car, you can't get budget tires for your sports car.
yeah,
You just can't. It'll fuck up your car. So same thing with a computer. If you have a high end motherboard, you can't put subpar parts on the motherboard because you literally are hamstringing the performance of your motherboard that way.
yeah,
That's where a lot of people mess up. They're like, oh yeah, I can just. Some people get like one, like, you can cheap out on some shit. Like, if you have a mid tier motherboard, you don't have to have the fastest, and it's got like 3 slots for NVMe slash M.2 SSDs. You can cheap out on one or two of them, but your main drive should be the fastest, most high read write that you can get. That should be where you install your main stuff on. So then, you get the best performance for certain types of things. Yeah, but you can cheap out on the side shit you don't access that often. That's not a bad thing. But anyway,
yeah.
that's just my opinion. Anything else before we wrap things up? Anything you want to pimp out?
Yeah, I do have a music channel. Well, I'm actually sharing a channel. Project Open Mic has posted a new song a couple days ago. Red Flame, Sister of the Riot. Uh, Check it out when you get a chance.
All right, all right. This is Mr. Red Fox. I do not have a music channel. I'm currently getting back into playing the sax, but I'm not sharing that with anybody. That's for me. Anyway, that's the end of the cast. Rate, comment, share, play your games, share your games. If you would like to get in touch with the channel, the links are in the description, etc., etc. Um, you know the drill. Um,